You were the one who always held the connection, the one who checked in, the one who apologized first, the one who texted after every argument, not because you were weak, but because losing the bond felt more painful than swallowing your pride. And the avoidant they knew, not consciously, perhaps, but energetically. They withdrew, stayed cold, and controlled the closeness. Not with words, but with energy. A silent power built on your willingness to stay. But then, your heart got tired. Not because you stopped caring, but because you could no longer pour into a connection that only had space for one person's effort. And you stopped. No more messages, no more justifications, no more defending them to yourself. And then, something unexpected happened. It's not you who breaks, it's their illusion of control that begins to crumble. Because what they once called freedom only existed because you were always there, keeping the door open. But now, the one who held the door has quietly walked away, and suddenly, the room they ruled feels painfully empty. Today's video will walk you through what really happens when the anxious partner finally leaves and how, in doing so, they shatter a power dynamic that was never real to begin with. Don't forget to subscribe and stay until the end, because you'll finally understand you were never powerless. You just didn't know where your power truly lived. Avoidants often believe they're in control of the relationship. They think that pulling away, staying silent, acting cold are ways to maintain power. They believe that by creating uncertainty and withholding emotional presence, they'll keep the upper hand. And sadly, it often works, at least for a while. Anxiously attached partners tend to try harder. They chase connection, soothe the tension, and sometimes even abandon their own needs just to preserve the illusion of closeness. But what avoidants don't realize is this: every time they withdraw without explanation, every time they choose silence when their partner needs connection, they're creating karma, not in some mystical or threatening way, but in the very real sense of cause and effect patterns that silently wound others and eventually wound them too. They don't see the consequences right away because they're buried under the false calm of, "I'm fine." But karma doesn't disappear. It accumulates in the form of broken bonds, unprocessed emotions, and unresolved relationships that decay silently beneath the surface. The true cost of emotional control doesn't show up in the present, it shows up in the slow erosion of their ability to fully feel someone's presence. They grow used to others always being there, always forgiving, always waiting. They confuse that with stability. But in reality, they've become energetically dependent on a love they never learned how to value. They think they're in control. But in truth, they're avoiding their own fear of vulnerability by building a false sense of power. They step back but keep watching you. They stay silent but expect your message. They keep you at arm's length but long for the connection from a distance. They hold you just close enough that you won't leave, but never close enough for you to truly reach their heart. And then, when you, the anxious one, finally stop, the illusion collapses. There's no one left holding the emotional rhythm. No one reaching out, fixing, or initiating repair. No one fueling the silent power dynamic they thought was clever. And that's when karma starts to return, not as punishment from you, not in the form of anger or blame, but in the quiet absence they suddenly can't fill with anyone else. Nothing breaks illusion like realizing the other person no longer wants to play the game. When you pull your energy back, not to punish, but to heal, they're forced to see the truth. They never really had control to begin with. When the anxious finally walks away, karma doesn't come as punishment in the physical world. It doesn't strike like a storm. It arrives as a deep energetic imbalance, a quiet emptiness that the avoidant can't name, but feels in their soul. They are no longer in control, no longer the one being pursued, no longer the person with the emotional upper hand. They're left with themselves and a silence that no one else can fill. They might not say a word. They may still post happy photos, keep smiling, pretend everything is normal, but inside, something is quietly unraveling. Because the absence of the anxious isn't just the end of a connection, it's the loss of a nourishing emotional field they'd grown dependent on without ever acknowledging it. When you were there, they didn't have to open up. They didn't have to face themselves. They didn't need to change because you did all the emotional labor for both of you. But now, with your presence gone, their defense system has no place to rest. They begin to feel restless, anxious, sleepless nights, dreams about you, a strange sense of emptiness because their soul had grown used to your steady, unspoken love. Karma isn't loud, it's patient. It doesn't shout accusations, it whispers through lonely mornings, phone screens without messages, the quiet realization that no one is waiting anymore. And in that subtle ache, a truth starts to bloom. The silence they once used as power now mirrors their own internal void. They realize no one's punishing them. They created the very emptiness they now don't know how to escape. You didn't turn cold out of anger. You simply stopped vibrating on the same frequency. And when energy no longer aligns, control no longer works. There's nothing more humbling than realizing I had something safe and I didn't know how to receive it. Oh, no one shatters their illusion like the peaceful strength of your absence. No one holds up a clearer mirror than your quiet return to self. When the anxious leaves, they don't leave chaos. They leave a silence so loud it forces the avoidant to confront what they've run from all along. Why does real love scare me? Why do I always flee instead of stay? What do I really want if love itself feels unsafe? And it's here in this unnamed crisis that the illusion finally breaks. There is no control. There is no power. Only a soul that must now face itself with no one left to chase, to fix, or to keep the lights on. They begin to feel restless, sleepless, confused with no clear reason, but deep down, their soul is screaming from the loss of control. There's no longer someone to reflect back their emotions, no one to hold the emotional structure together for them. And because avoidance never learned how to self-regulate, your absence becomes a spiritual earthquake. There's no final fight, no drama, no goodbye. Just a strange kind of silence, constant, unshakable, offering no path back. In their mind, you were the one who never left. No matter how far they pulled back, you stayed open, forgiving, patient. That created a false sense of safety for them. But now, that safety is gone. And they don't know how to function when love is no longer something they can silently depend on without ever giving back. That's when the soul starts to struggle. Not because they want you back, but because for the first time they are truly alone. Not lonely in the surface sense, but empty in a spiritual one. They're disconnected not from you, but from themselves. With no external energy holding them together, everything they've buried begins to rise. Unhealed childhood wounds, rejection, trauma, and their deep fear of abandonment. The walls they built to survive start shaking, and for the first time, they're forced to sit inside their own storm. And then, one of two things happens. They might choose to shut down even further, build a new, colder armor so they never have to feel that weak again. They'll laugh. They'll say, I'm fine. They'll pretend it didn't matter while something within them goes numb. Or they'll begin to hear the smallest voice within the one they've ignored for years whispering, maybe it's time to heal. This is the breaking point where the crisis can lead to awakening. They'll begin to realize that control never made them strong. It only protected a scared, unheld child within. If they dare to walk through that collapse, they won't feel freedom first. They'll feel grief, not because you were the one, but because you mirrored the gentlest parts of them, the parts they've long rejected. And slowly, they'll ask new questions. Why do I always push away people who care? Have I ever truly known love? If even someone that patient walked away, what's left in me? This isn't sudden enlightenment. It's a slow, painful, confusing process. They might run from it again. They might chase someone new, but they will never forget that feeling, the feeling that a source of unconditional energy once held them, and now it's gone. And in that moment, the illusion of control evaporates, not through blame, not through punishment, but through a clear realization of who they are without your light holding them together. The departure isn't simply an emotional choice, but a sacred awakening ritual, one that forces them to confront the shattered ego of control they once believed unbreakable. An ego that prided itself on maintaining distance, on directing your feelings at will, on dancing in and out of commitment without fear. When you consciously choose to step back and embrace silence, you initiate a powerful ceremony, not of incense and chants, but of vibrational energy that once bound two hearts in subtle alignment. Many avoidants don't recognize that in the instant you disappear, someone who thrived on indirect power suddenly finds themselves abandoned, hollowed out, directionless. They feel it in every breath, every heartbeat, and through those random thoughts that visit them at night. You are no longer their safety net. You are no longer the gatekeeper who let them in or out with ease. Their controlling ego, which believed itself superior by withholding responses, now faces a silent reflection of the profound loneliness only you could create. In that stillness, they come to understand they never truly generated their own sense of security, but rather depended on the energy flowing from you. As the ritual of silence completes, they discover that every tactic of control is instantly stripped away, because the realm of power has shifted from them to the emptiness of their own soul. Their hearts may flutter in bewildering rhythms, and in that fleeting, bewildered moment between confusion and the memory of feeling valued, they perceive two paths. The first is a return, an attempt to salvage with apologies, to repair with action, to demonstrate once more that they can indeed influence your emotions. That path often leads back into a looping relationship. The power game restarts, teaching you again that you must chase love to receive it. The second is far more challenging and profound: to turn inward, face the ego that craved control, and learn to reconstruct a sense of safety from within instead of from another. This is a pivotal turning point, because the journey no longer involves two people, but a solitary pilgrimage, a personal rite of passage in which they rebirth themselves, discovering self-regulation, self-love, and acceptance of their own vulnerabilities. At that crossroads, few possess the courage to embark on the second route, for it demands they confront long-suppressed fears, endure a protracted healing process unendorsed by external validation, and relinquish all illusions of social stature. Yet when they embrace this awakening ritual, karma's energy transmutes into healing. Each moment they face pain, each lonely dawn without messages, each silent acceptance of their inability to control, strips away an old shell and frees a fragment of the soul from the chains of fear. They begin to see that true power lies not in manipulating another, but in mastering the self, in maintaining inner peace when storms rage, and in granting themselves the right to serenity without external guards. Over time, this ceremony unveils an inner wellspring of strength they never knew existed, a newly forged sense of dignity, compassion for themselves, and an unconditional love frequency that once flowed outward but now courses inward. They no longer feel unsettled in the absence of someone sustaining them. Instead, they cultivate an auto-resonant field in their heart, where every positive thought, every act of self-care, every step of independence becomes a new heartbeat for their soul. And that energy, once solidified, magnetizes healthy relationships, ones devoid of power struggles, where nobody hides fear or flees from themselves. From a spiritual perspective, your departure becomes a ritual of transfer from false control to intrinsic freedom. It doesn't signify the end of a love story, but the start of a new chapter, where the avoidant learns to rewrite the rules of relationship with themselves and others. And whether they return or not, whether they heal or not, one truth remains: the ceremony of relinquishing control awakens part of the soul. And from that moment on, whichever path they choose begins with no longer running, but walking home, one step at a time. And precisely at the moment their partner lets go, the avoidant soul is thrust into an unexpected healing journey, a one-way path, where each step is guided by the ache of abandonment and the longing to reclaim a wholeness they never realized was lost. In that instant, they wake to the truth. It wasn't your love that ran dry, but their need to control emotions that held you in place. And when you walked away, they lost the launching pad for their power. There was no one left to challenge, no one to manipulate, and nowhere safe to hide. This realization sends them reeling. Each anxious wave pulses through their body. They nurse late-night coffees, eyes glued to an empty phone screen, heart racing at every notification, sound only to be greeted by silence. They dream of your return, only to awaken in despair, sometimes clutching a blanket in tears because your silence echoes louder than any reproach could. That healing journey begins when they are forced to face absolute emptiness. No you, no power, no protective walls. If they once thought to shield themselves by erecting walls around their heart, those walls now crumble to reveal a cavernous void they cannot fill. Their reflection stares back at them in the mirror, a stranger who once wielded cold power but now trembles with helplessness. They sift through memory-souled songs, childhood photographs, and a fragment that might restore the warm safety your quiet presence once provided. They try guided meditation, read self-help books, even seek spiritual healers, hoping someone can fix them with fresh energy. Yet through this process, they discover that true healing doesn't lie outside in formulas or advice, but in embracing the hidden corners they once concealed. They begin to weep at night, not because you left, but because, for the first time, they allow themselves to feel the full depth of sorrow and solitude, to let the stones of memory fall away and release their long-buried soul scar. Gradually, they learn to breathe with their emotions, to stay instead of running when pain surges, and to welcome themselves with all their flaws and wounds. They pick up a journal and write page after page, trying to explain why they fear true intimacy, and uncover a chain of unacknowledged terrors: fear of judgment, fear of losing autonomy, fear of becoming dependent, fear that love is a trap demanding sacrifice. As they confront these fears, an inner light flickers, not dazzling, but steady like a lone star at dawn, enough to guide them forward. They realize it doesn't matter whether you return. What matters is whether they have the courage to enter their own storm without your shield. In this journey, every choice to stay with the pain, every question they voice to themselves, shatters the chains of their illusion of control. And from the ashes of that control, a new self emerges, a soul capable of self-regulation, self-love, and inner peace. They no longer need you for rescue because they have learned to be their own savior. And in that moment, true healing begins not as a gift bestowed upon the avoidant, but as proof of the innate power that has always existed, merely awaiting the awakening ritual sparked by your departure. And that is the story. When the anxious finally finds the courage to let go, they don't just break free from the endless loop of one-sided giving. They initiate a sacred awakening that forces the avoidant to face themselves. They endure sleepless nights, tear-stained journal pages, and emerge learning how to rebirth their inner world, crafting a safety that relies on no one but themselves. Have you felt the hidden power in silence? Silence isn't a weapon of revenge, it's a healing balm for you, and for someone who once fled from deep love. When you step away, you send a crystal clear message. Genuine love cannot be manipulated, and the greatest source of value always lies in the ability to love yourself. If you're standing at that crossroads, whether to stay in control or to let go and awaken, both souls choose liberation. Let healing energy guide you forward. Thank you for staying until the very end. If these insights resonated with you, please subscribe, hit like, and share so others can also discover their own power. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring the strength of love starting from within.